Good evening to everybody and welcome to this webinar on behalf of the Ulster University Business School. My name is Jeff Simmons. I'm a professor at the Ulster University Business School attached to the Food and Drink Business Development Centre. Just to say briefly that some of you might know me. I've been working with the food industry for about 10 years now, along with Professor Andrew Fearn in most of those occasions, and you'll probably remember that we've been making available Tesco Clubcard data to the Northern Ireland food industry since way back in 2008 actually. So it's been a long run. We've been providing that data. It's still being provided to the Northern Ireland food industry. So that started off in Ulster University Business School, that whole initiative, and linking in with Professor Andrew Fearn. So we're very proud, the Ulster University Business School, that we have had that success and have been able to provide Tesco Clubcard data to firms in Northern Ireland to help them. Now, that's a very interesting aspect of this evening because obviously, you know, Northern Ireland food industry is under pressure at the moment. It's under pressure from multiple sources, but I guess the two that ring alarm bells for you all are Brexit and COVID. And you know, those two are potential game changers in many ways. In fact, there have been game-changing situations arising from, for example, COVID. The food industry obviously has not been unscathed. When we look at food retail, there's significant changes in food consumer behaviour, without a doubt. We know about bulking up with staples and things like that, but even research that we're doing at the moment, looking at time series data, has shown that leading up to COVID and now during COVID, there's been significant changes in consumer behaviour. So that's a really important point when it comes to innovation. The other aspect, obviously, food service, which has really been badly hit, and many food companies out there in Northern Ireland provide products to the food service sector. So again, that's a really big challenge. And of course, Brexit. Brexit's been around for a number of years now, but it seems to be still unresolved in terms of a trade deal being struck between the UK government and the European Union. And mid-October, obviously, will for whom the bell tolls in that respect, because we will know then whether we will have a trade deal and what the shape it will be, or whether it will be no deal. Of course, the implications for the Northern Ireland food industry are significant, whether there's no deal or a deal. And that's another big challenge in terms of change. And when you put that all together, the need for innovation obviously is always important, but it's challenged now by the fact that consumer behaviour is changing radically because of COVID. The Brexit implications are going to bring untold opportunities and threats. And of course, NPD and product development are going to be important in terms of how food firms resolve those. And within the whole context of innovation, which is really important, and particularly in times of change and trying to meet the changing needs of consumers and the changing environment, there's no doubt that in the Ulster University Business School and the Food and Drink Business Development Centre, we believe that marketing and consumer behaviour is really, really important in this context. I've said before to a lot of food firms I've worked for, and certainly people that have worked with me, colleagues like Ryan Harty and Grace Carson, Holly Millen, who I'm sure you've worked with, when we've been working with the consumer behaviour, Clubcard data, Mintel data, etc. One of the key things we have found in terms of how that links to new product innovation, to innovation, whether it's packaging, process, and particularly in terms of design of product, etc., is that the marketing aspect is really important in translating the consumer insight into innovation that customers want. And key to that, we believe, is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And they're really important. And a lot of the food firms still don't really understand STP, as we call it. And you know, you get accountants and they're trained for years. You get other professionals who've trained for years. Sometimes you look at marketing and you look at it in terms of, oh, it's one of those promotional activities, but there's much more to marketing than promotional activities. And in terms of innovation and using consumer insights, segmenting your customers into small groups of similar wants and needs that are relevant to you, using the consumer insight to do that, targeting those that are relevant, and positioning your new products, your current products, to those particular segments is really, really important. And that's where innovation can mean something to consumers. And particularly in times of change, radical change, brought about by COVID and Brexit, food firms really need to know who their consumers are, what they want from the food products that are being produced, and what innovation can be successful in the marketplace. One of the things we're doing in the Food and Drink Business Development Centre at the moment, and we're close to getting our website set up and so forth, and there'll be more announcements in the near future. But we've got a sort of a suite of programs that we're developing to support the food and drink industry in Northern Ireland. For example, we're close to finalising access to club card data, which will be rolling out in terms of workshops and one-to-one engagements with food firms in Northern Ireland. That's really timely, given these changes in food consumer behaviour that we've just mentioned. We actually probably will have the first workshop around COVID and these big changes that we've already noticed in terms of consumer behaviour and what they mean in terms of innovation. We've also got a consumer lab, which is a significant development, and Dr. Lindsay Hollywood and I were recently down in Korean to partake in the first sort of go at the virtual reality set that makes up the consumer lab, and really it is something quite to behold. And basically we're in terms of a virtual reality situation, we can see consumers moving around the store, picking certain products, and we can record their comments as they do that. So it's really rich qualitative data in terms of how consumers shop, which obviously is important for food firms in terms of linking this to NPD, to packaging, to category management, as well as to retailers as well. And that links very closely with the consumer data, the club card data. And then the fact suite, which I'm sure some of you have already used up in Korean, where sensory evaluations of new products, etc., have been going on for a number of years, and that complements that as well. So a real suite of programs and support for the Northern Ireland food industry coming to you from the Ulster University Business School and the Food and Drink Business Development Centre. And I guess then sort of wrapping around that is our new MSc in Food Design and Innovation, which we're very excited about, and we're recruiting at the moment. And again, that particular course, a part-time postgraduate course, talks to the things I've just mentioned. So NPD, segmentation, targeting, positioning, how segmentation and targeting positioning can take consumer insights from Clubcard, particularly Mintel, from all the other forums, Kantar, and turn them into products that consumers want. So that's a really important course that we believe is very timely, given these challenges such as Brexit and COVID, etc. And we plan within that course to very much link food design innovation to consumer insight and to marketing in terms of these key pillars: segmentation, targeting, positioning, how they link in a systematic process to the 4 Ps: product, promotion, place, and price. These are really, really important to make sense of consumer insight, to transform it into new products that customers want. And that's where successful firms will thrive and take advantage of the opportunities that are coming from COVID and from Brexit. Whereas those firms that don't use these systematic processes, and because consumer behaviour is changing dramatically, they're liable to fall to the wayside because they don't keep up with those around them who do. And that's really important. And particularly for small firms and smaller firms, because Northern Ireland food industries dominated by these smaller firms, and they're particularly at risk from COVID, from Brexit. They don't usually have access to things like dunnhumby. Well, we're trying to make it available to them, and we're trying to make it available so that they can use it to make sense of consumer needs and changes in consumer needs because of Brexit and COVID, and how they can transform it into products that customers want. So this evening we're going to speak more to that in this program, in this webinar. We've got experts here from the industry and from academia and from important industry bodies who are all very capable and well prepared to speak to these important issues in terms of innovation, dramatic changes that are coming the way of the food industry in Northern Ireland. So without further ado, after that introduction, and by the way, Lindsay as well will speak to this new course, the MSc Food Design Innovation, at the end, which I think is going to be a really class course, and hopefully you stay for that and listen to what that is. So without further ado, I'm handing over to Robert Ainley, and Robert is the compere for this evening, and he's going to manage the rest of the evening. So thanks again, and as I say, with the initiatives we're taking forward with the Food and Drink Business Development Centre, we all hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Jeff. As you say, there's a really excellent panel here this evening, excellent and varied, so really appreciate you giving us your time and expertise this evening. The first person we're going to speak to is Jack Hamilton. By way of introduction, Jack is the Chief Operating Officer at Mash Direct. He's been with the company, obviously, man and boy. It's very much a family operation, Tracy and Martin, and both the boys, Lance and Jack, very much involved. Jack is taking the lead at the moment when it comes to their expansion and their marketing strategy. He's helped to help them grow into the household name that they are today, something that's recognised in a slew of awards that he has personally won himself, things like the Businessman of the Year award from the Ulster Tatler in 2017 and the Young Business Person of the Year from the Belfast Telegraph that same year. So Jack's now overseeing the operational side of the company and bringing innovation and quality to the market. So we thought that he was the ideal person to talk this evening about innovating in a crisis. So first things first, I suppose, taking it back to the beginning, if I may, Jack, can you tell us a bit about the sort of eureka moment when the idea behind Mash Direct was first conceived?
Yeah, thanks very much for that glowing introduction, Robert. You're very kind. Yeah, no, awards are a big part of who we are here and how we've developed our brand here. But right back at the start, we started off here as very much a family farm. Mum and Dad were needing to diversify here. I mean, the topic for tonight is innovation in a crisis, and at that stage, we were in a crisis as a family farm, in that we were looking at the return on the margins we were getting in our whole head produce, which so we did back in 2003. And it wasn't going to work for us in the long term. We were looking at the way the market was changing, and we were looking at how consumers were changing, and realized that we were going to have to do something different. Otherwise, the family farm wasn't going to be able to survive at that point. And we looked at a load of different options, including, just turning it into property development here, anything like that. But it was a eureka moment, which I suppose two different eureka moments that happened both with my dad. One of which was just walking through a supermarket. It was M&S at the time, and seeing how consumers were behaving in M&S and watching just how quickly they were walking through different aisles and looking at what was happening in the produce aisle when people were moving really quickly through it because they knew what they wanted. They weren't stopping. They were going in, checking the list and grabbing it. And then they were getting to the next area, which where M&S had some of their prep foods at the time, and people were stopping there. They were considering what they were buying, and essentially, to use the terminology my dad uses, they were grazing, as the cattle would have. So at that point, he realized there's no growth that's going to come quickly in the produce sector, but where the growth is going to come is the convenience sector. And it's easy for me to stand here and say that now in 2020, because it seems so obvious that convenience was the way to go. But back then, there was a lot of pushback, when he was getting started. There was a lot of people saying, look, if mashed potato could sell on supermarket shelves, why wouldn't we be doing it, or why wouldn't somebody else be doing it? But at the time, nobody was doing pre-prepared mashed potato. And we started by doing good traditional Ulster champ, and that's what we started with. That was essentially the eureka moment that existed in his head, and he knew that was there. But what it did take was, I think, a few glasses of whiskey at a dinner party, which was the second part of that eureka moment, sitting down, chatting to friends, and a friend who was an engineer, and coming together to say, okay, there's a food element to this, there's a consumer element, and also if we can design something that essentially is just scaling up a kitchen oven, essentially scaling up a steam cooked facility. And that was it. It was just combining engineering knowledge with the market demand for what we thought was a good idea at the time. It turned out, thankfully, to be a good idea. And that was essentially how we innovated in a crisis at the time, and how my dad saved the farm and started us on the path to success.
It's very much responding to a necessity there, but by doing it very much directly looking at what the consumer was wanting and how they were behaving. You've already said that your sort of breakthrough product was that mash potato. What did you learn from that breakthrough when you started to see the success, when you started to see the orders coming in?
I suppose what we learned quite quickly is we knew nothing about consumers. We knew that they wanted what we had, but we didn't know much about them, and we didn't know much about what their needs were. We understood the convenience, health message. We knew what we wanted to see on the shelves, but we didn't really have an idea of what consumers wanted at the time. And to give, I suppose, an example of where we were at that point, we were selling into two independent stores in Killaloe and Clinchy, out of a white van we were just taking from the site here in Cumber. And the other place we were selling was in St George's Market, which was a slightly different marketplace back in 2003, 2004. It was a wonderful place, and it is an even more wonderful place today. Back then, it wasn't as hard to get into as it is now for traders. So we got in there and we were selling, and we were convinced at the time that our big sellers were going to be our champ and our mashed potato. And the ones that didn't sell there were turnip and carrot and parsnip. Just didn't sell at all in St George's Market. And we assumed this was just because that's, nobody wanted that. That's what we were growing, so we were processing it. And at that point, we were about to give up and just go purely down the line of doing the potato products. And that was until we started seeing the figures coming through from those little local convenience stores in Killaloe and Colinchie, which are the ones we should have been paying attention to, because those are the ones that are then going to grow the business. So we took a break from what we were doing in St George's Market. I say we took a break. It was absolutely teeming with rain. And it was one of those days that no one was out in the marketplace. We packed up, went back, and then saw just how much we were shifting through those convenience stores, and looked at the channels and said, hold on a second, do we want to be a small market stand? Do we want to focus there? And it was my mum who said, no, hold on a second, it's the mashed turnip here. This is the one that, while it's a brute to prepare, for us, it's what the consumers need, because it's a brute for the consumer to prepare. This is the one that's really going to save people time. And while the mashed potato is lovely and it's a fantastic product and the champ is wonderful, and both of those grew, it was the root vegetables, especially the turnip in those early days, that gave us a real point of difference on shelf. It was something that nobody even had a concept that they could buy. While mashed potato was a new concept, buying mashed turnip seemed to be a real game changer as well. So having that range available in those local convenience stores then took us from being in sort of 2 local stores in Killaloe and Colinchie to being in over 9,000 stores right the way around the UK and Ireland.
I suppose, as Jeff had touched upon, it is so important to know individual consumer groups. And as you say, a business, it's easy to have pet favorites, ones you perhaps prefer and you might intuitively want to put more time and effort into, but the data has suggested otherwise. So just how important has data and customer data been in making decisions that help steer how you take the company forward?
For me personally, they're crucial, and I've been I was a big advocate of this from day one. When I came back and rejoined the company back in 2012, I went away to university, I did a bit of studying, came back in again, and one of my big things to bring back into MashDirect was saying we need to lead by data and look at where the consumers are. And when I say market data, it's not only looking at Mintel, Kantar, and looking at those decks, but it's also looking at social media and seeing what people are interacting about, both on our own platforms as well as in general food platforms, and seeing what people are excited about. So definitely data was really important for us to get started off with, and it influenced some of the new product development decisions that we made, because we were able to have conversations that we wouldn't generally have had. I mean, when we started doing our big campaigns on Facebook, we were getting feedback from people who were saying, oh, your product, this is lovely and I really like this, but what I'd like to see is I'd also like to see this. Or not only when it came to, I suppose, development chefs and working with them, it was pack formats. It was looking at having single serve portions. It was looking at having vegan options available and seeing when the right time would be to hit the market with a vegan option. And right the way through, to when you have things like Planet Earth and David Attenborough giving that incredible series, which then focused on plastics, and for us to realize a lot of what we use is single-use plastic, and consumers started feeding back to us saying that was important to them as well. So we just kept innovating in that way, and we used that to then remove all black plastic. Within 2 months after we saw that and saw the consumer response to it, we immediately said, you know what, this isn't going away. And while I would argue that environmental sustainability has maybe become less of a focus in 2020 for consumers, I'd say it's still there. It's just latent in what people are looking for. There are other priorities right now, but that's coming back again. There's another crisis coming down the line, so I think people are going to be looking to that and looking at more sustainable companies in the future as well. And it was looking at market data that meant we were able to be first movers on that. We were able to change our packaging, go to green packaging rather than being in our black packaging. We're still not 100% where we want to be for the future, but we were able to move quickly on it. And that's been the same with our product. And it can be the most random things that can work for us. I mean, one of the best, I suppose, bits of feedback we got, or one of the best sections of feedback that we got on our product range, came from a product that never actually existed. And that was something that we created for April Fools, which was the mashed potato face mask, which ended up with me on Sky News at 7 o'clock in the morning on April Fool's Day, with the presenter rubbing mashed potato into their face. And a lot of people reached out to us to see if they could buy mashed potato face masks, if there's a real thing, and if mashed potato actually exfoliates your face. But the other side of it was loads of people got in touch and said, yeah, that's clearly nonsense and that's really funny and that's great, but I'd like to see you in Waitrose. And loads of people in England suddenly were seeing us for the first time, and they were saying, I want to see this brand in Waitrose. I've suddenly found out more about them, and they were writing to us and saying what they specifically wanted to see was the carrot and parsnip in Waitrose. So we were able to use that as part of our conversation around getting into bigger listings by taking that consumer data, feeding it into the customer at the time, and saying to them, look, this is national coverage, this is what your consumers are looking for. And while they're not looking for the health message on their face, they are genuinely looking for a health message, and here it is. So it was really useful for us in that sense.
Right. As you touched upon in the previous answer, you obviously started out with mashed vegetables. You diversified in response to consumer demands. Sometimes that's led by culinary trends, things that people might make in their kitchen, but are time consuming. As you said, the turnip's something that's difficult for people to make and time consuming. I'm thinking about things like your beer battered chips, chili baby bakes, things like that. What were the challenges in diversifying that range and responding to that consumer demand for these new products?
Yeah, Robert, I suppose one of the challenges we have here is that we grow the vast majority of what we do ourselves, and we make it on the farm. So there's obviously the capital requirement right at the front end to have the equipment here to then turn what is an idea into a reality. So there's the investment in the machinery. So as part of that, we do have an in-house engineering team to constantly build here. We've now got a team of 8 engineers who are permanently on site, and part of that is preventative maintenance, and the other side of that is looking at projects to take the company forward, because innovation's in our lifeblood here, but we've always got to think about it on the other side, which is whenever we do something, someone's going to try and copy it very quickly. And I suppose the most important thing for us when it comes to innovation is backing ourselves and backing the brand. Part of that is designing bespoke machinery ourselves so that we know that it's our process and we are trying to build something that is ultimately unique. The other element of that is essentially backing the brand and backing what we do here, which is absolutely critical, because one of the main challenges we have out in the marketplace is own label, and that is turn off my cameras next to me here, which are flashing now. So with own label coming at a small size, basically it's big manufacturers who want to pretend like they can do what we do here. And in our early days, in about 2012, one of our big challenges was we were supplying a major supermarket and had a national listing. And they said, okay, that's wonderful, but we'd like you now to convert everything that is Mash Direct into own label. At the time, they were 18-19% of our business, so it was a very significant decision for us to make. But we said, do you know what? We back ourselves, and our consumers are behind us, and they believe in something that has provenance and is local, and they trust the brand. So we're going to trust them, what they're saying. We believe they'll continue buying our brand, and they're not going to buy own label. So we turned down that business. We lost overnight 18-19% of our business, which obviously is a very significant hit to take at the time. And I'm not going to name the national retailer, but I'm very happy to say that we are nationally listed there again. Having gone through that, we go through that rigmarole with these supermarkets every now and again. Tend to get a buyer who thinks they can find a manufacturer that do exactly what we do here, because we always back what we do. We design the machinery ourselves, and in addition to that, we invest heavily in the brand to make sure consumers know what they're buying into. That is the power of having a local, for us, Northern Irish brand to say, this is what we do, this is what it's all about. It's all over the wall in behind me as well. We've got to communicate that message, and if we don't understand our consumers, we're not able to do that.
Do you think when it comes to proprietary innovations like that, do you think you would have made the same decision, say 5 years before, if you were a smaller company starting out and you perhaps felt that that listing would help you move to another level in terms of being able to invest more in the business? Would that be the same advice basically that you'd give to a small firm who had something that they felt that they wanted to back, but maybe as a business decision decided that it might be better to give that as a known label product? Would you still advise them to stick to their guns?
Yeah, 100% stick to your guns would be my advice to any SME out there. And the reason for that, I'd say 5 years earlier, it would have been an easier decision for us to completely shut down the own label conversation. And the reason for that is we've got a policy here that no single customer can be any more than 20% of our business. And if you're a small company and somebody comes in and says, look, here is the deal of a lifetime, we're suddenly going to, it's going to double your business. It's also 50%, and supermarkets are wonderful, and they're a big part of our success story has been working collaboratively with the supermarkets on innovation. But if a buyer was to realize that they own 50% of your business, that is going to be the only factor that comes into consideration when it comes to price and price negotiations. They've got a job to do, and we are, as we stand here in 2020, we're facing into possibly the deepest recession a lot of us will see in our lifetime. So the buyers will be thinking about the consumers who are thinking about their pennies, and they're going to go for the hard price negotiation. So now more than ever, it's really important to stand by the brand, I would say, especially when consumers are talking more and more about provenance and about supporting local and about buying through e-commerce in different channels. There's more opportunities than ever, in my view, for SMEs to grow right now.
Mm-hmm. So stick to your guns and have faith in your innovations.
But I think you've got to back yourself, because if you don't back yourself, the supermarket won't back you either.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned in 2020, obviously, significant challenges, both in terms of COVID, but also, as Jeff alluded earlier, to Brexit as well. Have you seen a difference to how the consumer has behaved since the beginning of the pandemic, since March? And how have you responded as a company? How has Mash Direct responded to that?
Yeah, consumers have been behaving. I mean, consumers have been behaving differently this week, let alone back into March. It is a roller coaster, especially in chilled foods, where we essentially every single day we're making to order. So we are entirely attached by the arteries to what the consumer whims are on that day. So since March, we've seen, I suppose for us, a roller coaster, because we supply into food service as well. So to broadly divide it into a few different phases, I mean, I'd say 4 different stages for us as a business in the chilled side dish category. The first being panic. I mean, just outright panic, and everyone going to the shelves, grabbing what they could and going home with it. And obviously famously started with the toilet paper and started with the really weird things panic buying. But for us, thankfully, we were part of that consumer spend, and people were saying, this is something I'm going to need for lockdown. So we did well out of that. It was quite interesting from a marketeer perspective to see what were the items that were left on the shelf. And I'm not going to be mean and name those items, but it was really interesting to see, even in a fit of panic, what people wouldn't buy. And buyers definitely didn't miss that. And that then led to the next wave, part of the influence, some of the wave of delistings that came afterwards. The next stage after the panic was then the lockdown. And during the lockdown, it went from, I suppose, from supermarkets in panic mode, it then went to people being concerned and not wanting to go to supermarkets anymore. So for convenience products like us, it was great because we were supplying into a lot of convenience stores. So we saw that really lift up, especially here in Northern Ireland. We've got such a high penetration of the convenience market with the success predominantly of Henderson's, the Spar Group, meaning that convenience went really well for us as well. So that was a really interesting change. I suppose that the big sea change in that wasn't necessarily whenever lockdown happened. What we noticed from our sales figures was it was Boris Johnson suddenly coming down with COVID was the thing that really changed consumer behaviour. Not being told it was a big deal. It was actually that symbolic representation of how serious it was, I think, changed a lot of consumer behaviour overnight. And we actually saw a lot of things just quieten down for a couple of days. Everyone was a little bit concerned. And then we saw the patterns come back up again. But the other, I suppose, in a product focused way, that for us was a lot of our healthier products did quite well at that stage. Consumers were thinking more of health messages, thinking that was going to be important to them. And also we got a lot more hits through our social media on any messaging in around being local, and e-commerce as well. So our e-commerce sales went through the roof at that point. We went up 4,000% week on week during that time when we moved from being not in lockdown to being in lockdown. Suddenly we saw those who were most vulnerable wanting to order food to their homes. We saw huge shift there. We were running our Feed the Nation campaign and our Feed the Heroes campaigns, and both those were very successful for us, and also very useful in getting food to the NHS where they needed it. And then I suppose the post-lockdown phase, whenever we moved back out of that, the convenience stores kept taking off. Alcohol sales also went up at that stage, and people were kind of trading up. So we saw things like beer battered chips and beer battered onion rings were doing well because people wanted to have something that was like restaurant food, but not quite restaurant food. So we found the takeaway side of things did very well. We actually put together a whole takeaway section. We did takeaway menus. We replicated lots of different things you could find in restaurants that people didn't feel comfortable going to. So we sent these out with our e-commerce boxes so people could see how to cook like a Nando's meal or a Wetherspoons meal or whatever they wanted to replicate. And then finally from that, then we moved into the Eat Out to Help Out campaign era, which suddenly meant that people were going out. So that where the beer battered chips and beer battered onion rings would have done well, we suddenly then shifted back into the healthier products doing well on the shelves from our perspective. So during that, again, big government policy changed consumer behavior quite dramatically. Especially we saw that supermarket sales dropped on Mondays, Tuesdays and Wednesdays for products that you could get in the pub. But for us, sales continued to grow strongly in the grocery sector. So all of that's been feeding into our new product development that's been going on behind the scenes, just trying desperately to get a gauge of where consumers are going, because they are changing on a week by week basis, especially now that the Eat Out to Help Out campaign is largely finished. Certainly the government support for it's finished. So it'll be interesting to see what consumers do now this week when that changes again, but it'll definitely feed into the products that we'll launch in 2021.
Such uncertain kind of patterns of consumer behavior. It must be tempting, I suppose, to focus on retrenchment when it comes to your product lines, consolidating, maybe just having the core products rather than taking a risk on new ones. Would you say it would have affected the way you innovate when it comes to developing new products, perhaps not just in terms of sort of the size of products, not sort of maybe single serve as opposed to larger packets, but actual new lines of products? Would you say you're maybe doing that less as a result of the uncertainty?
We held our SKUs on through it. So our decision making behind that was, if we get the health and safety aspects right and you're really focusing on our people and make sure we've got all the precautions in place, then we'll focus on the product second. And that's really what meant that we could do what we wanted with our product range, because we were able to make sure that we had all the precautions in place. We had them from week 1, week 2 of March, whenever then the rest of COVID rolled out, and obviously all the horror stories of places that weren't prepared for it. We're dealing with it. And I'm not saying we have it 100% right yet. I don't think anyone will ever have 100% right on what it is. But for us, we didn't reduce our SKU range in terms of single serve because our consumers were asking for them. And we didn't want to let them down at that point. We had people, especially older, vulnerable people, who were asking for those single serves because that's how they do their portion control. We had people who were part of Slimming World and groups like that who said this is how they structure their consumer behavior, and therefore they didn't want their products taken away. So we were really conscious of making sure that people could get what they were looking for. And a lot of that was driven by the e-commerce sales, because we suddenly had a lot more direct information coming straight to us, where we would have had to go to either Mintel or dunnhumby or buy the data from somewhere. We were suddenly seeing a very different consumer picture, and it was people who were looking for, weirdly, 2 trends, which were single serve on one side, and on the other side, really spicy food. And I don't know why that second one, but it was a really weird trend that came through.
What lessons would you say you've learned from this whole experience from COVID that you would pass on to a smaller business? Obviously, it seems that MashDirect's really thriving in this. You've mentioned a bit about the e-commerce. You've mentioned as well just about monitoring, I suppose, what the consumers want in terms of the size of the products, the way people are purchasing. What would you say to smaller producers who are looking at sort of navigating this sort of difficult post-lockdown period?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it comes down, Robert, to like just taking the theories that I suppose we all, we learn in our various different walks of life. I mean, I didn't go to business school, but I read a lot of the books afterwards to try and take on board some of the messages, and had good friends and good advice who had been through it. And it was essentially taking the very simple tenets and repeating them in your head as the day went on. So for us, every day would start with the senior leadership getting together and discussing the four most important topics to us right at the start of the day, 7:30, discuss how are people, like make sure health and safety, is everyone keeping well, then go from that to supply. Do we have enough contingent supply to get through today? Then we go to demand and look at what is demand, what's changed from yesterday to today, and then finally finish off in cash, just because in crisis mode, business, we've got to make sure cash is king, keep an eye on the cash. Because I mean, I suppose it's easy for us to look at it now and say, we've done well, we've weathered the storm and we're through to where we are now in September. But for us, it was just such a huge, the changes that were going on a daily basis. We just wanted to touch those four things every single morning. And what that gave us for the rest of the day was, it wasn't just the fact that we just wanted to know where we were and just checking on it. It just gave us confidence when we were chatting to each other that we were all going through this together. There was so much new information out there, and it stabilized the senior leadership team first thing every single morning so that we go out there and lead from the front. So I'd say it's just doing the really simple things over and over again. It sounds maybe oversimplistic, but it just helped to ground us and took us right back to, right, okay, we're still an SME. This is really turbulent times. We're just going to do the simple things well, review at the end of the day, and then start again the next day, and don't take anything for granted.
So never lose sight of the fundamentals, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your answers there. I think we're maybe going to move on to the panel section next. I suppose by sort of way of introduction here, as I say, we've got a really excellent panel this evening, so it's great to have you all on board. In no particular order, we have Mike Johnson, who is the CEO of the Dairy Council. He's also a visiting professor at Ulster University, and he's been in this role for 3 decades, so he's got a huge wealth of experience in the dairy sector, and he's fed into a lot of food industry policy there. So it's safe to say he's one of the most connected people, I think, within the food industry that we know. Deirdre McIver, she is CEO of the Northern Ireland Pork and Bacon Forum, which is a pretty massive local operation promoting local pork with over 400 families involved and 2,000 local jobs. Professor Barry Quinn is from the retail marketing section of the business school. He focuses on SME growth and innovation in areas including food and retail. So it's great to have Barry here. And Dr. Sandra Moffat as well is a reader in data analytics within the Food and Drink Business Development Centre. She's been actively involved in research and published over 35 papers in leading business and computing journals. So we'll look forward to hearing all of your insights here. If I could start, I suppose, with Barry here. Barry, could you just share with us some recent product innovations that you've seen within the food industry that really stood out for you? Anything that's really impressed you?
Well, I suppose I'm more interested in local food products, like as Jack's been talking about, MashDirect, been obviously a very, very strong example of local food innovation. I mean, there's lots of examples of excellent examples of local, excellent local food and innovation. I suppose just to say at the start, that's in light of there's a lot of current international market trends that are going to influence types of innovations we see. So you've got obviously health trends, environmental, ethical, sustainability issues, and I mean, you just have to turn on the TV at night and look at some of the ads, and the ads around meat-free products, vegetarian alternatives. Might want to hear this, but the growth in plant-based alternatives from dairy products. There's a lot of innovation around that. So I mean, there's a lot of big macro trends going on influencing innovations at the national level. Rather than pick out any, the international big brand stuff doesn't particularly, excite me that much. I'm personally more interested in what's going on locally, and there's lots of good local examples. I'm just thinking about this early on. Some of the companies that we will be familiar with and work with in the business school, and there's some excellent examples of innovation from local companies like Glassdoor, and some really quirky ice cream flavor alternatives. They've got that whiskey collaboration they have with the Dublin company. You've got Finnebrogue, or a brilliant example of local innovation, what they've done works with Spencer's over the years, the sausages line. You've got other companies that I've done some work with through student projects, like Food Stories and the Cloud popcorn range, and taking popcorn snack convenience product, doing something quirky with it. There's new flavors like a spicy barbecue flavored popcorn, and they've got their I suppose alternatives to healthy alternatives to less healthy options like crisps. So I mean, there's lots of good examples at a local level, I feel, of really strong innovation. I think that's really important at the SME artisan level, simply to get the company name out there, compete, make the product stand out on the shelf. And it's a crowded, as Jack will know, it's a crowded shelf space in the supermarket environment, especially. So it's just going back to that one example I gave of Food Stories, and it's a guy, Michael Heaslop, that started that business not that long ago. Starting off with a relatively small base, operating from home, really, his parents' house, and selling internationally. Having listings with the likes of Ahold, in Holland and so on, and Albert Heijn Group. Really some great success stories, and really good successful stories of creativity and innovation at a local level.
So you paint a very strong picture of local innovation. Jack, you touched on earlier on from the ecological side when it came to packaging. Is that something that's sort of an ongoing body of work? Are you keeping that under review, looking for new different types of packaging when it comes to your products?
I've got sitting on my desk, it's what my fruit bowl is in sustainable packaging. It's all over here. So it's something that's really high on the agenda here, and it's trying to find somebody who's going to crack the solution, essentially to cure what to us would be like the coffee cup problem. Is that for our particular products, you've still got to have a membrane barrier between something that has quite a high moisture content, like carrot and parsnip, to the external, compared to the external, and there's still that essentially that 5%, which is not fully combustible. So yeah, I mean, that is still high on the agenda in terms of innovation for us. It's not, I suppose, something that consumers are asking for right now, but we do anticipate that it's going to come back, and it's going to be a big conversation, at least in 2021. At least we hope so. We hope the conversation evolves beyond COVID and Brexit at some stage soon. But for us, yeah, it is very high on the agenda. We're still looking into it. We're still innovating. And it's about then, I suppose, retrofitting all of our machinery to be able to deal with these as well. So it's not easy. It's not cheap. But if there is that critical volume that all of us get together in the food industry, and all of us say, look, we want to do away with CPET, we want to move on to more sustainable packaging. If all of us are together in it, then it's going to make it happen a lot faster. So for anyone out there in the food industry who knows anyone else is interested in going into this and looking for trays, we're entirely behind it.
Very good, very good. suppose looking aside from COVID, it's not maybe been dominating the headlines to the same extent that it had even a year ago, less than a year ago, in fact, with the trade talks at the end of last year. But Brexit certainly hasn't gone away. That's something that, Mike, you've been keeping a pretty close eye on the whole way along. What would you say would be the policy implications that Brexit might have on business at the moment? Obviously, we've had various different developments when it's come to trade between GB and Northern Ireland. What would you say are the main policy concerns at the moment when it comes to Brexit for Northern Ireland food producers?
Thank you very much, Robert. Thanks very much for the opportunity to take part in this panel discussion. Really a fascinating story that Jack has had to tell us. It's tremendous that Northern Ireland Agri-Food can still generate these sorts of success stories. And I think it's a real credit to Jack and his family that they have achieved what they have done. But we're coming up against a major issue in Brexit. Everyone realizes that. We had 2 cliff edges last year where we thought we were going to crash out. And those weren't pleasant experiences for anybody in business. We're in a different situation now in that we know that Northern Ireland will operate under the product protocol. There are still some key areas of the protocol where we need to get clarity both from the UK government and from the EU in terms of, so that businesses will have more certainty to plan, to place their bets for the future. We're still waiting for definition of qualifying goods, qualifying businesses that will be able to avail of unfettered access to the Great Britain, the GB market. We're still waiting to hear what the flow, how the flow of product from Great Britain to Northern Ireland will happen, and the definition of products that will be at risk and therefore may have to pay some sort of a tariff. But we do know that there is going to be quite considerable documentation and therefore probably costs that will be involved. And for example, if a product that's coming from Great Britain to Northern Ireland needs an export health certificate, we know that that's going to be maybe 40 or 50 pounds a time, because they cost that sort of money from vets in Great Britain. So the REC dimension is very much a wait and see. There's also the island of Ireland dimension, which is sometimes overlooked. And a lot of sectors, a lot of companies have developed island of Ireland supply chains, value chains over decades, dairy being one of them. And decisions that will be taken in relation to having access, for example, to European Union free trade agreements will have a major impact on some of those flows of trade. But I think the reality is that in terms of unfettered access, the only market to which we can be guaranteed having unfettered access is actually the EU market, because it'll mean we'll be able to carry on doing what we're doing at the moment. So the protocol has been a game changer compared to where we were last year. But I think when you put on top of that the impact that COVID-19 has had, Jack has been talking about the SKUs. We're saying that there has been rationalization of lines. Therefore, by definition, there's going to be an opportunity. But I think that what you will see here is, as we get into next year, I think that companies will look at their business models. They'll look at the exposure that they have had in food service as opposed to retail. And I think you might very well see some rebalancing there. But I think that from a food business point of view, the big challenge is going to be around competitiveness. Now, there's many aspects of competitiveness, and the topic of this evening of innovation is highly important. But I think there's going to be an opportunity here for businesses to innovate, not just in terms of the product, but in a key aspect of customer relationship management. We have seen that customer relationship has changed significantly over the past 6 months. And I think you're going to continue to see an evolution of customer relationship management. And I think there's going to be a big opportunity here for companies to innovate and build on the relationships that probably have deepened with their buyers, whether that's in food service or whether it's in retail. So policy, I think it's an evolving area. We've got to get the clarity from UK government, from the EU, to allow companies to plan, for example, not least in labelling and packaging. But I think that the spin-off of the combination of Brexit and COVID is going to challenge existing views of key areas of business, such as customer relationship management.
I don't envy your task at all, Mike, in navigating the next few months, but hopefully we'll have a good degree more certainty come the autumn. This is quite a difficult one for you, Deirdre, but one nonetheless that I think is important. Again, it pertains to exports when it comes to pork. Are there any opportunities, do you think, that you see in the coming months? Any positives, you think, when it comes to exports? Obviously, when it comes to pork, you'll perhaps be looking beyond the EU to further markets, further afield. Do you think there are any opportunities looming on the horizon there for pork?
Thanks, Robert. Well, yes, when you talk about exporting globally, I mean, it's very critical for all the primary production industries like beef, pork, and dairy as well. For pork in particular, we speak to it if you think about it, you know, farmers produce the animal, it goes into the supply chain to the processors, and you need to sell or make value of all parts of the animal's carcass. And here in the United Kingdom, you know, people will be readily buying, you know, bacon. They'll want to buy legs, maybe shoulders, loins, these sorts of things. But there are other parts of the carcass which are not to the consumer's taste here, which are to the taste of consumers, you know, in other parts of the world. And that helps us achieve, you know, the very critical carcass balance, because you just could not simply, in basic terms, be producing an animal just for, no matter how much of a price you'd be getting for it, the waste would be too great. You don't want to be disposing of that because there's cost to that, and you don't want to be just putting it into the processing as in, say, for example, in the animal food chain, like for dog food or something like that. So there's value that has to be maximized right across the board. And that helps an industry achieve its efficiencies, and it helps it adhere to its stronger codes of practice in terms of welfare production, in terms of quality production and quality of the product itself. Now, for the pork sector in particular, you mentioned China has been a hugely important market for us. Now, it's taken a long time to gain access to that market. That market values very highly products such as trotters, which, for example, here we would not be finding a market for at all. It may be something you hear spoken of historically in terms of pre-First World War, or even after post-First World War, that sort of thing, where they talk about products like trotters and brawn. And unless you see chefs like Marco Pierre White making trotters, pig's trotters, very trendy at a very, very inflated price on a restaurant menu somewhere in central London, it's not the sort of thing that we'd be selling here. But they value those products exceptionally highly, ears, heads, these sorts of things, as well as other cuts of pork. So this market has been particularly critical to us and has helped the pork sector sustain its prices at the farm gate very well. In this last year or so. As I said, it took us somewhere in the region of going on, you know, almost 10 years to gain access to that market. So when you're breaking into a market such as that, which is requiring for industry times, it's not just a question of a company going over and knocking at the door in a business. It has to be cleared at governmental and food production levels. So it's an engagement that it's led through DEFRA, through DERA here, with the government channels over there, and begins with questionnaires, first of all, on our processes and protocols, and then there's returning visits, which we host here, where they will inspect premises, inspect that everything is to their liking and to their requirements, and then you wait until various to's and fro's have gone on and you do become successfully listed, hopefully. As I say, that market is very, very critical, and that has become more critical for us when we see China having been badly affected by outbreaks of African swine fever, which is a very severe disease for pigs. It's ironic in a way that we're seeing profitability supplying a market which is being suffering from a disease which we would fight hard with our protocols and wouldn't want to see getting anywhere near here, because it could potentially wipe the industry out. But as Jack and Mike would have said before, that you have to find opportunities where you look for market access and market success wherever you can. So we're seeing growth in that market as it continues, and we also know that in the wider Asian Pacific kind of market is also further potential for growth in that respect. As well as that, we see, you know, there are products that will go to Australia, for example. That can be quite seasonal. It will go in, say, in January, so there can be peaks and troughs with some export markets, which, you know, companies can make ready use for particular products. I mean, they're sort of barbecue season and ribs, those types of speciality products that they would see, you know, that would be quite seasonal, and also products that that go into, you know, countries such as America. So we do look far and wide for these continued export products, which is very, very critical. And I suppose it's where do you consider you maybe it is our home market very much, but it's in some ways you're applying principles of export insofar as the GB market here is concerned, because we're selling that as our most critical market, you know, locally first of all. But that continued look, because you're always trying to stay one step ahead of the curve. So, for example, when China recovers and rebuilds its own herds back from the ASF and starts to have increased internal production, then the slow will come on demand for product from countries like ours and others across Europe. So that's when you really will see the need for having looked wider to say, you know, other countries in that neighbouring Asian market and beyond, to see where can we find replacements for that, or to balance out as those markets differ and change over time.
The pork industry certainly led the way when it comes to sort of cultural awareness, looking out to markets in other parts of the world, particularly over in the Far East as well. So an excellent exemplar of that, and some good examples. Deirdre, I'm conscious of time here, so I'm afraid I'll have to move on very quickly. And last, but very much not the least, Sandra, who seems to be shrouded in darkness there, but hopefully going to illuminate us a little bit here when it comes to the technological side of things. Sandra, any sort of technological developments, do you think? In the food
just realised that, Robert, that I seem to be in the dark here. I think technology, you know, as is at a fore very much for any industry at the moment. As Mike had touched on, that whole customer relationship management is more and more key, and we need to understand sort of the history decision making. So understanding the data that you have collected around your customers, around your products, your sales, your packaging, etc. All of that leads to your decision making for the future. So trying to underpin everything with evidence from the data that you have in your repositories, and basing your strategy around that is going to be key for any industry to recover post-COVID, to be innovative, to secure their customer relationship management, and to provide sustainability for their organisation moving forward.
So I think a lot of very excellent and valid contributions there. Some recurring themes I'm seeing here around securing sort of the fundamentals, the importance of relationships, even in innovation, these sort of themes come back again. So I think we've certainly picked up some excellent advice. I think to finish off, Lindsay's going to give us a bit of a rundown of the course that's coming up here. So I'm going to turn over to you, Lindsay, and let you take it up from here. But thank you all very much for giving us your time and your expertise this evening. It's been really interesting.
Yes, thank you so much, folks. It was really, really insightful. And I thought we've had a great discussion, lots of new ideas. I'm scribbling down like mad, so I will follow up with you after this. But look, I am really not going to keep you because I'm conscious it's 3 minutes past 8, so I'm going to try and do this in 1 minute. So basically, we have launched a new course called Food Design and Innovation. It's a new master's degree program. It's a part-time degree program lasting 2 years. We developed the course in collaboration with industry. They came to us, a lot of SMEs that we work with, always saying that they had issues understanding the consumer and looking at areas like sensory evaluation and even areas such as legislation as well. So we thought, what better way to support the industry than to create a course that really suits these needs. So what we have developed as a result of that is this 2-year course with 7 modules. So those modules include things like food choice and the consumer, food policy, sensory evaluation, data-driven food design, food and drink innovation, and food design and digital communication. And really the capstone of bringing that all together will be then creating your own product concept or your own business concept as a result of going through that product development journey. So one of the key issues that, as I've just said there, industry did touch on was the challenges with product development and understanding the consumer as well. And you know, Jack spoke about there the turn-up problem, and that's ultimately what we want to do, is to try and figure out what problems do consumers have that we are actually trying to solve. And one way we can do that is using data insights from big data such as the Tesco Clubcard data, from Mintel and Euromonitor reports, and gathering all that intelligence together to try and really figure out what will the consumer do next, and how can we create products then suited to their needs. So that's ultimately a quick rundown of the course. The course itself is based in Belfast, although it is multi-campus in that we have access, in coming on to this course, you get access to our facilities, and Jeff touched on them at the very start of the webinar. We're currently developing the only VR convenience store on the island of Ireland. We're the first institution to do that. And it's going to be a mock-up of 2 types of store. Firstly, a Spar store, and secondly, a Falcon store of the future. Think Amazon Go. So you will have a unique opportunity there to come in and participate in that store and get a real understanding of how consumers shop a store. The second facility is that for the food and consumer sensory testing suites, and that is, we use that regularly to work with industry to help them develop innovative new product concepts and to do a lot of sensory testing with them as well. So we've got lots of facilities along with the Academy restaurant, where sometimes you're maybe wanting to create a product for food service. And so you can actually use our restaurant to test your menu concept as well. So, I mean, as I say, there are lots of opportunities. You can come back to me with any questions and I'll follow up on that. But the cost of the course is £7,530, and we are looking entry requirements of having an honours degree, a second-class honours degree, plus 1 year's food and drink experience as well. But that's all I'm going to say. I've kept you long enough. So I really have appreciated everybody's contribution tonight to the webinar, and Jill is going to just finish up things there.
So much. Yes, thanks so much everyone on the panel. That was really, really interesting. There's one question here from Hannah, who said, when you mentioned taking Mintel data and Dunnhumphy and creating products customers want, is that relevant to private label as well as branded label products?
Okay, I'm going to direct that, Jeff, if you don't mind, because Jeff is actually the expert in the area of dunnhumby data. Is that okay, Jeff? You take that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And private label is obviously important for many, many companies. But you know, when you think about, for example, Tesco, obviously big private label provider. What drives Tesco in terms of a key part of their business is segmentation. So they have the Tesco 5 families. The Tesco 5 families is basically how they make decisions in terms of listing, delisting. They use other things like repeat purchase, which is really important, and that touches on what Mike talked about in terms of relationship management. Repeat purchase is absolutely critical. Obviously, with private label, new product development is really important as well. And Tesco are going to push, even on private label, in terms of new product development and currency. And when you think about their 5 families, just very briefly, the 5 families, a lot of food firms don't realize that Tesco use this. It comes through in the Clubcard data, the 5 families. But what they are basically are young, sort of unattached, unmarried, if you want, students, etc. That sort of millennial Generation Z, really important demographic. You know, food on the go, etc. Increasingly into environment, increasingly into health. And then you got, of course, the 2 married family sort of segments. So you got young married, less affluent, young married, more affluent, and then you've got married or in relationships, empty nesters. So they would be older couples and affluent, and then less affluent as well. So that's the 5 families. The biggest segment, would you believe, is the older segment, affluent. That's the biggest segment, and Tesco are really, really big on that. And I know Mash Direct, for example, and Jack have looked at that sort of segment, the older segment, in terms of their products. You know, people with arthritis who maybe can't cut turnips or whatever, the Mash product is really ideal for them. So those segments are really important, whether it's for private label or for branded food products, and Tesco look at them really, really carefully, and they come through very strongly in Clubcard in terms of those segments and lifestyles, lifestyle, life stage, and psychographic variables, etc. So all these variables come through when you're segmenting, targeting, positioning. But just to emphasize that for Tesco, segmentation, private label, branded label, it comes through very strongly, and the 5 families is a really key aspect of that, and it comes through very much in Clubcard.
Thanks very much, Jeff. I think I'm just conscious of everyone's time, but I just really want to highlight that the course is still open for applications for September. If you're interested in getting more information on the course, then you can contact Lindsay directly. If you want more information about the fees and the finance and how you could finance this course, you can contact myself directly. I can talk you through the application process or flexible payments that we offer. Also, if you're an alumni of Ulster University, you do get an additional 10% discount. So please, if you have any questions around fundament, contact myself, and any questions for course contact, you can get in touch directly with Lindsay. Thanks again to everyone on the panel. I'll try to get this up on the website for anyone who wasn't able to attend, or if you want to go back over everything in the next day or two. And thanks to everyone who joined us. Thanks.